And then the rest of it is what the levy was, or the property tax levy, and what goes onto the property tax base. And that's about $19 million. So that's about how, or that is how the 2025 budget laid out. So the question is, what will those revenues look like throughout the end of this year? Um, so if we start to look at 2026 for departmental non-tax revenue, we don't really anticipate that changing much. This is primarily state and federal dollars. Department heads have done a great job at maximizing that revenue, and we need to watch and monitor anything that comes out of Albany that may affect those rates, but we really don't see anything affecting it in a positive way. Some positions, particularly at DSS and the Department of Health, are funded to 80% or 100%. So there will be some increases as labor rates increase in this revenue line. But it is not expected that these will increase significantly in 2025. The second area of revenue in our budget, the 17.95, which comes from sales tax revenue, if we try to look throughout this year, there is one bright spot, and that is short-term rental legislation, which will require online platforms to collect and remit sales tax to the state of New York. They will also be collecting and remitting bed tax to the county. The platforms themselves will be doing that. So that will be a bright spot, but we really don't anticipate a lot of revenue from it. And we also, it probably won't take effect till the third quarter or fourth quarter of this year. We don't know the full impact, but we believe it'll be around $500,000 increase in sales tax revenue generated from that short-term rental legislation. It's hard to predict consumer spending, but all indications are sales tax will remain flat throughout 2025. Last year, sales tax increased by 1.1%. So if we predict sales tax increasing by 1% in 2025, that's 179,000. You add in the 500,000 from short-term rental, we're going to see an increase of about $679,000 next year from those two sources of revenue. Property tax, everything that doesn't get raised by federal or state dollars or by sales tax has to be levied onto our tax base. We've been very fortunate since COVID in that the value of assessed value has been going up very dramatically. I don't see that happening in 2025. Real estate prices are stabilizing. There's more houses on the market. They're not selling in 24 hours like they were. There's no major pilot agreements coming on board in 2025. Those are the two areas that we look to see a change in tax rates. Last year, we saw a 4.4% growth in assessed value. I would expect a more modest increase this year in assessed value of around 3%. So let's analyze our expenditures and see what we can predict for 2025 and what that may look like for 2026. There's three areas of focus. There's labor, and our budget has a labor cost of $25.8 million. It is one of the largest expenses in the county budget. Equipment is running about $800,000 annually, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then our contracts, everything else is contractual expenditures, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we can address some of that. A little bit of our labor analysis. We have a great workforce. I want to make sure when we have this conversation that I'm not blaming the county budget on our employees. We have great employees. They work hard. Inflation has eroded everyone's standard of living. This is not a conversation about employee compensation. Insurance and retirement costs have hurt not only our employees, but it also hurts the county taxpayers because we pay a large portion of that insurance cost. So it's had an impact on our taxes. We as the county can only really control positions. We don't have a lot of control over the rate of pay that's contractually done with the union. We don't have a lot of control over insurance and retirement costs, although we're trying to, do what we can with insurance costs. So all we really can control is positions. And by managing the size and efficiency, we can compensate properly and reduce turnover. It is a compounding expense, labor is, because if it goes up 8% this year, next year it's going to be 8% on that larger number. So we just have to be very careful when we're looking at our labor costs and what the impacts are going to be to our tax rate. Right now, in 2025, we have a budgeted full-time equivalent of 300 employees. And that is a number that we've kind of been working at so that we have a control number when people come and want to add a new position. We know currently budgeted 300 FTEs. We believe, and we're kind of doing some digging on that. We had a meeting this morning. The actual amount right now is somewhere around 277. And the difference is positions that are not filled, because a lot of departments have a vacancy that has not been filled. So we're actually around 277, but we've budgeted around 300. Labor cost for the county, as I said, is $25.8 million. In 2025, we saw an 8.3% increase in labor costs, a 3.5% or 3% COLA, cost of living adjustment, was built into the contract at 3%. I apologize, that's incorrect. We also saw step increases, and we had some allocation changes. And as a result, we also saw a 14.2% increase in health insurance and a 20% increase in retirement costs. The entire labor went up 9.3% last year, or in this 2025 budget. So the question is, what do we expect it to do in 2026? We don't think it'll be that large because the step increases and the allocations will be gone. We think it's going to be around 6%, about 3 percentage points lower than what it was this year. Our equipment costs have been going up dramatically as well. We have 145 pieces of equipment total, and that is every piece of equipment over $20,000 in value. We have 65 cars and trucks in the enterprise rental program, and we have 80 non-enterprise pieces that are valued at over $20,000. So even the sheriff's side-by-side is included in that number. So we wanted to get a control number there too, because we want to try to control the size of the fleet. We want to make sure we're running as efficiently as possible. The total value of that equipment is $11 million. We have about a 50% equity in that. So most of the equipment is fairly modern right now. And when we get rid of it, we can sell it and get about half of the value of that equipment. That comes out to about an $800,000 a year annual cost to maintain that fleet. Equipment cost has been increasing by 20 to 30% annually. As you all know, the price of all of this stuff has been dramatic due to the supply chain, and emissions requirements is really what's been driving the equipment stuff. So let's look at what all of that means. Equipment cost at $11 million, 50% equity. If we average a 7-year replacement cycle, that's $800,000 a year. If that increases 20% a year, that's $160,000 increase in expenditures that we know we're just going to have because of inflation. Our tax impact between labor and equipment. Our labor is $25.8 million. And if we have a 6.3% increase at the end of this year, at the end of 2025, that's an increased expenditure of $1.6 million. If our equipment goes up by 20%, that's an additional $180,000 for an increased expense of $1.8 million. You're right. I'm sorry. Got distracted in the middle of that slide. Thank you. Yeah, you just fixed some of it right there. Our anticipated revenue, as I mentioned, is only $679,000. So if we stay the course and do not do any changes, try to get more efficient at how we run government, the total impact of the tax levy will be about $1.1 million. So we don't want to do that. We want to try to figure out how we can control those three numbers. Ideas and efficiencies. County is a big ship and it turns slowly. It's better to plan and forecast for minimal impact. We want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So moving forward, we have budgeted 300 FTEs at $25.8 million. We want to try to set that as a hard number and not grow above that. And if anything, when vacancies come up through retirement or attrition, we want to try to look at those and see if there's better ways that we can staff. The same with our cars and equipment, 127 pieces. That's our hard number, not to go above that. And we're looking at different ways that we can share resources, cars, carpooling, some things like that. We're looking at some GPS so that we know what the utilization. We actually have cars in the county fleet that get less than 8,000 miles a year on them. And if that's the case, is that something they can share with a different department? So we want to try to see if there's ways we can reduce that as well. We want to use data and technology to find efficiencies, both in vehicles and in positions. No vacant positions are going to be posted or backfilled without a meeting with Caitlin and I to see if there's a way it can become a shared position or we can find some efficiencies there. No capital equipment purchases filled without a meeting. The same thing with cars and equipment. Brian Hanno and I will be reviewing each request and trying to figure out if the utilization justifies having that piece of equipment in the fleet. If we have a piece of equipment that's only being used for 5 or 6 hours a week, that really doesn't justify having a large capital expenditure for that. So that's the stuff we're just trying to look at. Ideas and efficiencies in procurement. This is the big number that we really haven't, looked at, but Brian is the procurement officer. We're getting together a list of all contracts, and there are things that have never really been considered, like health insurance that we're doing the RFP this year, our general liability insurance, engineering, professional services, a lot of things like that. And what we're going to do is try to set up a schedule so that every year, and maybe it's a 5-year cycle, certain things are going back out to bid so that we're constantly ensuring that we're getting the best pricing on these things. It's going to make a master RFP bid schedule. The fleet, as I said, no growth in size. We want to look at utilization and better use of scheduling and sharing. In personnel, the same thing, no growth in overall size of the county workforce. Examine positions through attrition, invest in leadership and skills training, use data analytics to find efficiencies with the existing workforce that we have. So that's kind of some of our ideas to try to steer this ship in the right direction so that we don't see, so that we keep managing that cost. Find cross-departmental efficiencies as well. For an example of that is Munis, which is our accounting software. What we're finding is that departments that don't use that software a lot and have very few bills to pay, they're not very good at it and they make lots of mistakes. So what we're seeing is, maybe in Eric's office, if somebody who does accounting all the time can pick that up, will it free those people up to do some other things? So looking at cross-departmental efficiencies like that. So that is my presentation. Is there any questions on that? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. We did talk to Nymer about that, and they don't actually have a premium reduction for the cameras. What we're looking at actually is the highway department is testing it right now. They have in all the plow trucks, there's GPS now, and there is cameras, front facing cameras. Brian just sent me a picture of what it looks like in Copenhagen right now. No sound. We don't want to record the employees. We don't have any cameras looking in on them or anything like that. This is merely just trying to figure out efficiencies for the equipment. We're seeing how well that works, and so far there's not drops in coverage, and we're a little concerned about that. And then maybe expanding that out. When you sit down every year with the department heads to talk about equipment, of course, everybody comes and says, I need this or I need that, but we don't really have a lot of data to support how often is that being used and how, making sure that we're really doing that well. Any other questions on that? Well, there's a couple, as you know. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. For the take-home vehicles. Um, no, I'm trying to forecast out, and look at next year. I don't disagree, Andrea. The question is, we all owe it to our taxpayers to be efficient. Mhm. So, yeah. And overtime labor is an issue as well. We have to, be very cognizant of that. So, okay. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Let's talk about the goals that we want to try to set today in committee. And yep.
I really appreciate Tim taking this proactive look at where we're going. I think he said it, but just to reiterate, I mean, we've had two big effects in the last couple of years. One was kind of pandemic related. Sales tax revenue just increased significantly in the last 5 to 6 years. We're not going to see that continued growth. Property valuations have gone up significantly. That's going to moderate. So those two things are huge impacts on our budget. And without those continued increases in revenue, it's difficult to balance expenses that are always going up. So I think proactively looking at this, really thinking as we go through this year. So I don't think you said this, Tim, but in September, October, not like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I think that's really the way to approach it, and good way to start.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Well, in a really simple way that I'm looking at it is, if our labor rate is our labor is $25.8 million and our levy is 19 million, for every 1% our labor goes up, our tax levy is going to go up 1.4%. So the question to me is right sizing the government, making sure that the size of it can grow naturally, because we know inflation is going to affect wages, but we have room to do that without impacting the taxpayers. And that's really the goal, is just picking up every stone and looking at it and making sure that we're doing the right thing here. So, okay. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about goal setting, and we're going to talk about 2024 goals, where they stand, what ones got completed, which ones did not get completed. And then we're going to try to set 2025 goals. In the process of that, one of the things you're going to notice is that the goals that didn't get completed in 2024 were not very specific. They were pretty broad, like enhanced childcare is a goal that was in 2024. And it's pretty hard to do that. And in management, they have this saying that if you can measure it, you can do it. And if you can't measure it, it's pretty hard to obtain it. So the SMART goal process is really all about that. And the SMART is an acronym, and I added one more to it, but it's a framework for setting objectives and strategies. And the S in SMART is specific. They need to be very specific goals. The M is they should be measurable. The A is they should be achievable. The R is they should be relevant to what you guys see the future of Lewis County. And T is they should be time bound. That is the SMART goals. And Cassandra is going to hand that out for everybody so that you can kind of keep that in your mind when we're setting these goals, is that they should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. And then the other one that I added was accountable. So who is responsible for achieving that goal? So if it's my job, if you say county manager should be doing this, then we need to put that in that goal so that we have some really defined goals and who's going to make sure that they get pushed forward on a regular basis. The specific, clearly define the goal, ensuring it's precise and unambiguous, avoid vague language. Example, increase community participation in local meetings instead of improve in community engagement. So you're being more specific. Instead of, what do you mean by community engagement? Okay, we want to see a higher level of participation in the local meeting, for example. Measurable takes it even farther. Establish criteria to track the progress and determine when the goal is achieved. So achieve a 10% increase in attendance at meetings instead of increasing community engagement. So now we've made it more specific and we've made it measurable. We've given it an actual number. Achievable, ensure the goal is realistic and obtainable given the available resources and constraints. It should challenge you, but remain possible. An example, organize 5 community events over the next year instead of organize a festival every month. So if we want to do something like increase engagement and it's increase attendance at town board meetings, is it realistic that we're going to double the attendance at town board meetings, for example? That just wouldn't be a realistic goal. So just trying to make sure that we can achieve them, making sure that they are relevant, align the goal with the broader objectives, and ensure it matters to your group. So you as legislators are setting the agenda. You're setting the path forward for Lewis County, and these goals really should reflect that. The overall mission or vision, it should contribute positively to your priorities. For example, launch a local recycling program aligns with sustainability efforts. So whatever goals or mission that you see for the county, these are the time to put them in here and get them so that we're working on them. And then time bound is we want to make sure that we have a deadline so that next year when I'm standing in front of you, we can say we've done this and in the goal period. So set a clear deadline for achieving the goal. This creates a sense of urgency and helps prioritize tasks. For example, complete the project by the end of the fiscal year or complete the project eventually. Most of the goals that you'll see didn't get finished, never had anything like that. They just said enhance childcare. By when and by how much is the question. So that is that. And then accountable, clearly define who's responsible for the outcome. If it's a department head, if it's the county manager, for example, to be completed by county manager, I just think is helpful. Then we know, okay, I'm the one that's going to be pushing this project forward every, so often. So, and that is what we put in front of you is that specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, timely, and accountable. So as we're going through these, if you guys can think about that and we can really tighten this up, I think we can really deliver some good goals for your group. And then we're going to go to General Services Committee at 1:00. So in about 5 minutes, and we'll go through those goals. Sound good? You're welcome.
2024 committee minutes. Could I have a second? Thank you. And now the General Service Committee goals, presentation by Tim Hunt, please.
So we're going to start with 2024 goals and where they stand. And then I did reach out to department heads to forward any ideas they had that they would like to present, as well as the legislators have sent individual goals to be considered. So I've got those in this presentation. We'll start with the 2024 goals and where they stand. The first one was complete Board of Elections, DMV, and outdoor services renovation projects. That is complete. Open Singing Waters Park is complete. Now, if there's any of these that you think there needs to be a next step, we can certainly move that to 2025 and add more steps. So Singing Waters is open. If you think that, for example, the next is to develop a camping or marketing plan, whatever, if there are, please speak up and we'll move them into 2025. Execute the Glenfield Complete Streets project. That is complete. Execute the courthouse renovation project. That is complete. However, there are some future projects here in the building, upgrading the HVAC system, and the elevator at some point needs to be updated as well. Both of those projects, correct, Matt? So, continue with the EMS ad hoc committee, launch the BOCES EMS program. The EMS ad hoc committee has met. The BOCES program was launched. That's all complete. Continue with EMS ad hoc committee. And this was a goal that was recommended, I believe, from a legislator, add 10 Lewis County Search and Rescue basic EMTs from the BOCES program, and then add another 10 BOCES students to the BOCES program. So that's a good example of a really specific goal that we may want to carry forward to 2025. Stabilization of the ambulance services was something that was recommended as well. So I don't know, any thoughts on any of those that we want to carry forward or talk about for 2025?
I think the stabilization of the ambulance services and continue the committee with the 10 students.
Okay. Cassie, if you want to put that one down. So for 2025, one of the goals we want to have is continue the EMS ad hoc committee, adding 10 paramedics and 10 BOCES students, and stabilization of the ambulance services. Oh, I'm sorry, EMTs. Yep.
I'm not sure. On that, it says that all 10 go to search and rescue. I think the goal was to have them go to any agency in the county, not specific to
Okay.
search and rescue.
Right, so 10 EMTs entering Lewis County's pool. Okay. Yeah. How do we measure that?
I don't think you can define that at this
Okay.
point in time with
Right.
our knowledge that we have now. I think that's going to be as specific as maybe you can get. I know it doesn't meet your SMART goals,
Right.
but
How about meet with all interested parties and involve the ad hoc committee?
definitely on that.
Yeah, and with regular updates to this committee or to the General Services Committee? Yeah. Okay.
Maybe we set a number of meetings that we should have, because if you don't say you're going to have so many meetings in a year, you just say, yeah, it's there, and we don't, and we tended to stop meeting, but I think we should continue to meet.
4?
I would say 3 or 4 at least,
Okay.
I'd say 4.
4.
Yep.
Okay. Who do we want to be responsible for this goal? Is that Bob McKenzie as the EMS coordinator? Is that me?
Andrea, if I can just answer that, maybe is, so you have the ad hoc committee. Did that committee designate anybody as the coordinator or chair, maybe that ad hoc committee should convene and decide on who's going to be the person who's going to coordinate that and what are the groups you want, and maybe that should be the first structure of the meeting.
Okay. To be determined by ad hoc committee.
I would
I-
think that Bob McKenzie would be able
Yeah.
to set that up.
He's not here, so I thought it was a really good opportunity to give it
right.
to him.
He actually reported about the BOCES project and like that over the past year, so I think he may be the point of contact.
Do we want to move as a goal, or is it not elevated enough as far as future projects here at the courthouse?
The HVAC is, that's under a timeframe far as, I don't want to say failure, but
Yes.
that has to get taken care of.
And there is money in this year's budget
Yeah.
to move some of that forward to replace boilers. So I think we should.
I think that should be on there.
Yep.
Well, before, I think if I remember correctly, before we move ahead with the HVAC, we've got to come to a final on what we're gonna do with staff, where we're gonna move them, because that was part of the problem of what offices were gonna be active and which ones weren't.
Yeah. I-
So,
Believe that has been finalized now, correct?
okay. So what would be the next logical step for that, to move forward with an engineering or design concept, or?
I think Matt and I had talked about it, that he thought that to use the actual contractor, which is Train, correct?
As the main contractor, do they tack on to their like engineering or anything, a percentage?
By the Omnia contract. And I think, Barry, we debated, like, do we hire an outside engineering firm to design the system that we then go out to RFP? And even the engineering was a little scary to have, and we didn't want to get into a situation where the engineers really didn't know the equipment well enough and they didn't spec the right products. So that was just an internal conversation. If there's thoughts, we can certainly get it differently.
So obviously it's multi-year project. So how do we define what we'd like to, like, if we want to define phase one, well, what is phase one and how much does it cost? Okay.
You said phase one would be the boiler. How many phases do you anticipate it being? And is phase one the most expensive of the phases?
And we have the total proposal, so we can send that out to everyone again so that they can see that. And currently, Ward, that's slated to happen in January of 2026, correct? Okay, so we'll say boilers in 2025, and Matt is responsible. Perfect.
So would it make sense to call phase two, replace the stateside boilers to get ahead of the schedule that Ward's referring to?
Any other 2024 goals we want to move forward? Are we good with everything? All right.
Well, I think, we still, number 5, we've been stalled on Rails to Trails master plan, and the public input and engagement. Now that, I think that's,
Got it coming up here.
oh,
Sorry about that, Larry.
Fine.
I just meant on that particular slide. Study strategies to maximize state and federal funding for highway infrastructure, the road efficiency. It's been in progress. Obviously, it got stalled when the flooding happened in my transition here. We want to try to get that reestablished. So establish legal steps to continue the strategies to maximize county and town highway infrastructure efficiencies by March 31st. So Joan has been working on the legal part of that. And if we set that as a goal by March 31st and then execute on 1 or 2 locations by July 1st, does that sound like a reasonable, accountable kind of goal? Do you want that to be myself or John Reed?
I would think the highway department. I know you introduced this when you were in that role before. And I would, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, maybe keep that with the highway department. Have
Yeah,
John
yeah.
execute that and that'll filter up.
Yeah, I would keep it with the highway department,
Okay.
then you can just
Yeah.
oversee.
Okay. Very happy to do that. John's not here either, so let's assign him with some things. Continue ATV lobbying efforts, including trip to Albany. That is in progress. I know Larry and I have had a number of conversations with Park Strategies. There's a draft bill being circulated. It is in progress, but how can we make it more concise so that we can deliver something? And that's pretty difficult when you're waiting on the state of New York. But I think our biggest goal is to get registrations and increase the weight limit. Is that, am I stating that correctly? So if we could say the goal for 2025 is to make it so that side by sides can be legalized, and that can happen with the increased weight as well for 2025. That would be our goal.
Can we add to that a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
Can we add some benchmarking? Can you report to us a little bit more, and so we know what he's accomplishing?
Yes. So, and I've got another goal that's kind of outlining a bunch of that, but Park Strategies as a whole, maybe on a monthly basis, reporting what the things are that they're working on. So I think there's a whole goal in one of the committees here on just reporting to the boards on what's happening. Is that okay, or do you want specifically on this topic? Okay, then we'll cover that here coming up. Okay. Revise the junkyard local law that has been in progress. Review the effectiveness and identify the challenges of the current junkyard law by June 31st, and propose a revised law by October 31st to address this. We have already have some of the steps in place. I know Ward's team has given a bunch of comments. Cassie's reviewed them, Jones reviewed them, and we're starting to work on pulling them all together right now. So that is in progress. Does that seem like a reasonable goal for that one? Who would we like to make responsible for that? Ward? All right. Develop the Rails to Trails Master Plan, in progress. Identify first steps and priority locations for Rails to Trails plan with active public input and engagement. Those are what I have on that one. Any input?
What's our plan for the public engagement?
We haven't laid that out yet. I mean, they're Alta, the consultant that has been working on this, has a public engagement with a lot of different town hall meetings, public meetings, one-on-one. There's social media, there's everything involved in it, but that has all just been sitting on a shelf because we've been waiting for this decision to come. So that would be engaged as soon as you guys tell us when to do that. And so I guess that's the big thing here is we should probably put some timelines on that. When do you think, would you like that engaged?
So if I could just suggest that, first of all, the final decision from the STB comes out in mid-February. So we have a little time with that. For the actual transfer of the deed, that may take a little bit more time as well. But in the meantime, I think that Alta should be re-engaged. I think they were looking to start developing the public engagement and whatever group that we have working on it, we have to start looking at the trails and where we want to start first. So, I don't know if that helps your timeline,
Yep.
but certainly by midsummer, we should have something, an outline of what we're going to follow, I would think.
Okay.
I would add that it's kind of hard to pin down because the reason why we suspended it was we felt that there was no sense of doing public engagement until we could actually move forward on it. So it all kind of depends on when we get the deeds, clarity on the deeds, and when the SCB issues their final review or whatever they term that. So I would say probably June would be realistic to try to get the first public engagement.
So we can report back in June. Okay. Add one more town or village asset network to the ArcGIS system to include signs, culverts, bridges, water, sewer infrastructure for 2025. That was a recommendation.
I think it's, with the flooding and everything, I think it's important for all the towns to try to get all their infrastructure identified and get it on that GIS system. I mean, it's definitely going to help the towns, but it's going to be a conversation between probably each township.
So is that something they can apply for a grant for? Or, 'cause I just wonder if the individual towns and villages have the personnel to, to move that forward, or does the county do it for them?
If I can, so the infrastructure, the hardest part with this is the actual software, which Candy's department now has a license that covers all the towns and villages, so they don't have to buy the software anymore. They can actually collect the data themselves in the field by using a phone or an iPad. They can walk up to a sign, put that sign in, that culvert pipe. Also, Dank will do that mapping for them in some cases, and it just gets stored in our ArcGIS. So I think, working through the planning department and identifying a town, we've already have Krogan, Martinsburg. There's quite a few. I think there's 5 towns now that we have most of their assets mapped. But what we found during the flooding is that there's a lot of towns that have no idea where any of their infrastructure is. And that's really problematic when, like, for example, the village, knowing where all of their drainage systems are. So if we can help support the towns, and I think that'd be the key word is we don't want to tell the towns we're doing this. We just want to support the town's efforts in building their infrastructure mapping. Is that a fair? So support the towns in adding a town or village.
I think on that, Tim, to put a lead person on this would be every legislator that goes to a town meeting to share this information, and that the source is out there, and then work with the township, the supervisor and the highway superintendent, and then work with our departments and to come full circle. But I think would be up to the legislators to take the lead on that.
Okay.
Up to the towns and then go from there.
So you want to make legislators as the responsible party. Okay, sounds good. This was another one, infrastructure improvements and coordinated projects, roadway, water, complete streets. It's something that got started a couple years ago. Really, when a village does their water projects, and we have a number of villages that are getting ready to do them, is coordinating, redoing the roads, redoing the sidewalks, making sure we're looking at the complete street project, and how do we do that in a coordinated way. So that was a suggestion. Does anybody think that's a goal for 2025?
Can we identify what projects that are going to be happening?
Yes.
I mean, it says infrastructure improvement, coordinate projects,
Mhm.
but I think we need to identify what is going to happen in 2025.
Okay.
And then,
So we can send that list out. I think actually Cassie and I had a meeting just last week to kind of figure out, so I know Turin's water project is going forward this year. Krogan's is going forward. Right, so their construction probably won't be till 2026. Seville is probably not going to be in construction until 2026. And Port Lyden is going to be in construction next year, 2025. So those are the ones that we all know are upgrading their water systems right now. So we've been really successful at helping the villages get that done. But we'll get that out to you and we'll try to show you a timeline because Cassie met with John Reed to try to figure out, like coordinate over the next 5 or 6 years, how do we work all of this into the highway construction and grant funding?
I think on that, with our meeting, that we had, it was that 1 to 5, 1 to 10 year plan, the outlook, and you got the concept, identify, secure an engineering quote, the design, and then the actual implementation can be really from 5 years from today's date to the implementation of that. And that has to be coordinated with towns, villages, and then John Reed's department on the overall asset for the county road if it runs through that municipality. So I think, Cassie's department's involved, the highway department, and there is, just coordinate that time frame because there's some milestones. They may be 1 to 3 years out, but those are hard set milestones to procurement and then construction.
So would a deliverable be to establish a 5-year plan and report back in 6 months? So May, we could deliver a 5-year plan. Does that seem reasonable? And that's one I think Cassie would be the one to lead that as a planning project. She didn't say no. Okay. So that is what I had for goal setting. Now the question is, what do you guys have? Oh, that was just an example. I didn't actually have anything specifically as a goal on the recycling program. No.
You're not going to rip garbage apart.
Do we want to make that as a goal? That we have developed and implemented a new fee structure for solid waste by, say, August? Is that a reasonable? I'll give you enough time, Tip. All right. Okay.
I had one more, Tim.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of discussion on it and work on it. In the various part of the county is the blighted properties. I know we're working on the junkyard law redefining. There's been a lot of work on the blighted properties, but basically working with the towns and villages, that mean just the overall municipalities. And, we approved the engineering for the Adirondack School to go in and do a study on that. I think that's something to get looked at and streamline it where we can identify properties that may have a lot of turnover. They get sold, we haven't had an auction in the last year or so, but the can gets kicked down the road and doesn't become our problem, but then it does become our problem at a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 problem to the taxpayers. I think being proactive and getting ahead of it in various towns and villages in the county and finding a way to remedy those situations before they become a large, blatant, expensive problem.
So would a deliverable on that front, Josh, be that build codes, reports to the legislature, say quarterly or monthly, on property maintenance enforcement? I'm just trying to,
Yeah, and then it has to be a collaborative communication with the towns and villages as well, because the ownership comes from them as well in their communities. And then if the zoning code enforcer is the county, then it goes up to the county. But it's more just getting in front of it, just not letting these properties become vacant for 10, 20, 30 years, and it becomes a problem, which is expensive on the taxpayers.
the tools until they become torn down that really we have in our toolbox is codes. That's the only one that I can think of that we can push a little bit to, on the blighted properties, but trying to think of how a deliverable can be. Mhm. For the what's August, yeah, yep. I think maybe continued enforcement of property maintenance with reporting to the board, periodic reporting to the board, and let's call that quarterly. Quarterly reporting to the board, and that will be in wards. Okay. Anything else? The General Services Committee?
I think one thing, Tim, overall, this would cover all the committees, is once that goal is complete, I think it's good to look back through it and just summarize it in a condensed version, see what worked, what didn't work, any struggles, any big wins, and just, instead of just saying complete, there's always pros and cons to it as you're working through it. It'd be good to just encapsulate that and kind of learn on each one.
I have.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, now we'll do our draft resolutions.
The first one is authorizing agreement between Lewis County Highway Department and Barton and Judas for design and right-of-way professional services and to send out an RFP for the culvert replacement project known as Bozzer Road over Cuffcut Creek at a cost of $225,000.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Carried.
The second one is authorizing agreement between Lewis County Highway Department and Barton and Judas for design and right-of-way professional services and to send out an RFP for the culvert replacement project known as Eatonville Road over Otter Creek at a cost of $258,000.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Oops,
Just
sorry,
one
Larry.
question. Is that called?
Do you want that changed to bridge?
We'll double check that and make the correction in the final resolution.
Okay, thanks. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Carried.
The third one is authorizing agreement between Lewis County Highway Department and Barton and Judas for design and right-of-way professional services and to send out an RFP for the culvert replacement project known as Pine Grove Road over Harvey Creek at a cost of $177,000.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any nays? Carried.
Authorizing supplemental agreement 1 between New York State Department of Transportation and Lewis County for the bridge replacement project known as County Road 17 over Cobb Creek with an additional right-of-way acquisition phase cost of $8,000.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Carried.
Authorizing County of Lewis to be named the lead agency of the State Environmental Quality Review Act process for the bridge replacement project known as Bailey Road over Independence River.
Any discussions? All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Carried.
Awarding bid and authorizing an agreement between Lewis County and SNO Engineering Incorporated, DBA SE Group for design services and a winter recreation master plan for non-motorized forms of recreation at a cost of $101,720.
Any discussion?
Where's this located?
Any other discussion or questions? All in favor, say aye. Any nays? Carried.
Appointing members Jacqueline Mahoney of Casterland and Wendy Mosier of Glenfield to the Region 6 Fish and Wildlife Management Board.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Carried.
Appointing members Amy Green, Andrew Krakowski, Douglas Solomon, Matthew Morrow, John Reed, and Jackie Mahoney to the Lewis County Traffic Safety Board for a 3-year term, excuse me.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Carried. Okay, I have no motions and no executive session. I would ask for an adjournment to this committee. Can I get a second? Thank you. We're adjourned.
I'd like to call the Human Services Committee meeting to order. Everybody's received the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Barry? Presentations. Caitlin Smith, Human Resources.
So today I'll be continuing. Last year we did quarterly updates with retirees and recognizing our employees that had retired. So we will be doing our Q4 from 2024 retirees. We had 3 employees who retired. Unfortunately, none of them are able to make it today, but we're still going to recognize each of them. And then we will connect with those individuals to provide them their plaques and certificates. And we'll give them this little write-up that we were able to get from their coworkers. Okay, so our first retiree that we're going to recognize today is Pat Freilich. So Pat Freilich is retiring from her role as Director of Community Services, which she started in 2015. Pat has a job that many people don't realize is much harder than it appears. She has to work with our Community Services Board to provide critical mental health services to our public, build trust and understanding with all of our community agencies, and balance the ever-changing requirements from New York State. Pat was able to balance all of these factors and honestly made it look easy. In speaking with her coworkers, she's recognized as an individual with a wealth of knowledge and had the innate ability to understand and prioritize issues and initiatives that often had set terms or partners outside of her control that caused disruption or chaos in providing service. Pat was always open to dialogue with coalitions, councils, and community ad hoc groups, and her cooperation and willingness to work toward the best interest of others made her an excellent asset for Lewis County. Pat was a joy to work with, and for many here, she was a listening ear or a resource for sensitive topics. She was also known as an excellent baker, always making enough to share her delicious treats across the buildings. Pat, we wanted to thank you for your dedication, commitment to the services that make up our community, and hope you find joy in what's next after your retirement. All right, our next employee is Risa Roos. Risa had a lengthy history working for Lewis County. She began her career at the county JTPA office and spent a few years at DSS as a caseworker. She worked at county mental health and then left that for a while, but ultimately returned to DSS as a caseworker and became a supervisor in our child welfare services. Risa is renowned for keeping it real and having transparent conversations. One memory is noted by Commissioner Jones as, "I clearly remember hearing her tell a mother, 'Hate the drugs, not your kid,' many, many times." Her knowledge of relationships and relatives across the county was amazing. She seemed to know everyone or was somehow related to them. Her stories were peppered with a great sense of humor, and she could make me believe it was raining on a sunny day. Risa worked tirelessly to make sure children were safe and that parents were held accountable, always looking to make sure everyone was healthy and cared for. There are so many kids and families in Lewis County that Risa affected in her work. Some kids grew up and moved to adulthood, others returned to their parents, and some were adopted, but she kept track of them all. Risa often reminded those at DSS that the work was hard, the work needed to be done, and that the families relied on us. She was also great at reminding everyone that self-care was important if we were going to help others. She will be missed, and we wish her the very best in her retirement. And our final retiree for today is Lisa Hurley. Lisa joined the Lewis County workforce in 2007 as a computer systems assistant. In 2015, she transferred to the Social Services Department as the department's first full-time IT person. Lisa quickly integrated to the work at DSS, learning multiple state systems and representing the department needs to New York State ITS. Lisa was responsible for making sure that over 88 applications worked for close to 70 employees every day. She was an advocate for DSS employees, making sure those systems and hardware were working so they could best serve our clients. Lisa often worked late, and it wasn't unusual for her to answer questions from the ski slopes while on vacation just to get others back to work. One of her most complicated projects was moving all of the DSS employees and the equipment to and from the Glenfield School. She worked with New York State ITS to get the network set up at the new locations and could often be seen on the floor, under a desk, on a ladder, whatever it took to get multiple printers, line printers, workstations, WAPs, S's, cell boosters, laptops, cell phones, and everything else working. From Commissioner Jones, a little note, Lisa was an integral employee who was heavily relied upon and regarded highly by all at DSS. She became known as the Queen of IT and was the crown and has the crown and cloak to show it. Lisa's sense of wit sparkled with a bit of sarcasm, lightened the mood many, many times. Her experience and integrity moved all of us forward. We will all miss Lisa and her ability to work with some of the neediest employees, and we wish her well in retirement. Don't work too hard at that other job. So those are our retirees for quarter 4, and so we'll be back again when we have another batch in the next quarter. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Next presentation, Kim Hunt, County Manager.
Same process for goal setting for the Human Services Committee is we're going to start with the 2024 goals. Support public health's community health improvement plan. That is complete. Complete the Lewis County Hospital renovation project. That is complete. Reopen the maternity services at Lewis County Hospital. Complete. Continue to expand the child care initiative. And you'll notice that's in progress, and that's one of those really vague, what is our goal here? So that's one that we need to talk a little bit about. Do we want to keep it on the list? And how would we be more specific?
I would say keep it on the list and identify, complete one new childcare center
Okay.
for 2025. Expand. Like to see it school-based. That's just that's my own personal opinion.
Is that something that we can control because we're not gonna own the employees, so to speak, so just wondering how we pull that off and we're really not in control of it. I mean, we could advocate for it or, support someone and try to move it forward, but we would, our employees. And isn't South Louis, I think, about to come online?
I think with that, Cassie, is work with the schools, like you mentioned, Tom, and just identify areas or gaps throughout the county where it could be needed, and then have that conversation with the schools or just in those areas where they're lacking or where there's a bigger need for it across the county.
Yeah, if I can talk, so the way it happened in Harrisville was, it started with a conversation and, a plan developed from there. So maybe the goal is, develop a plan and then, maybe that's the measurable opportunities.
So to look for the gaps and maybe support the schools with the need. Okay. Yep. Okay. Who do we want to have responsible for this goal? Cassie? Okay. Okay. Um, and we'd like, how frequently for her to report back on progress?
Yeah, I would say quarterly.
Quarterly? Okay. Support employee wellness initiatives. It's, and if this was defined, I would say it was complete because there's a number of things that have happened. But, you know, I put in progress because I don't know if we want to still continue that and if we want to do more things on that front. Thoughts? I think there's some more specific goals coming up on this front, so we can kind of kick this one down a little bit. I'll throw something out here in a minute. And then lastly was continue to discuss recreation patrol. But that's clarification needed on specifically, is there a measurable that we can say we've made some progress on that? If not, do we want to keep it on there?
I think it's on that, Tim, I mean, it's a need, maybe summarizing, numbers of tickets issued, miles traveled, just, and then having that data, we can go from there. And then maybe accidents that are related across the county. So you have your hot spots per se, and then identify those areas and maybe identify or hone in on those areas and then see what may be needed from us to support that measure for those assets needed to, you know, is it personnel? Is it equipment? I think the equipment's identified, maybe it's personnel, but
So would it be to start a dialogue with the sheriff to find out how we can support increasing recreational patrol?
have that background data on what's there and then work together what may be needed to enforce it more.
Okay. Assess data and identify needs. Okay. Who do you want responsible for that? Me?
I was going to sign Jessica.
Okay, yeah. That's a good one to give her.
I can second that. I'll second that.
Okay. Review the jail medical contracts and options. And I think we set kind of a more defined goal, check for 3 other options for review by May 31st, 2025. Any thoughts?
That's been on the goals for a couple of years, I think.
It
isn't
has. Yep.
Is that achievable to get?
Yeah,
The
I think
3
we can do the research on 3 other options. You know, what the feasibility of them are, I don't know, but we can certainly do the research. Who's in charge of that? I'm good. You can put my name on that. Continue to support services to help meet the needs of older adults, allowing them to safely age in place in their communities. This was a recommendation from a department head. Any thoughts?
After the last year's NISAC conference, I thought it was very interesting. Like, I can't think of the guy's name. Carla may know. But anyway, they did a study on 50 plus of really getting a look at 50-year-olds moving forward of what that looks like as, you know, everybody's aging, because that's what you're going to face with for far as meals. You're going to face with, you know, staying at home and stuff like that. It would be nice to see what that looks like. What are we going to be facing in the next 5 years or 10 years?
So some demographic information
Yeah.
specific to Lewis County on what the aging population is going to be predicted to be.
Yeah, because we always seem to pass a resolution for more funding for the meals and congregate sites.
Mhm.
That's just showing us that
Right.
demographic is growing, I think.
So would you like a multi-year plan for this support?
I think this looks more like identifying what we have right now and what can we do to
Okay.
support that, what them needs are.
Okay.
I'm probably talking about a multi-year other plan.
Okay. So you'd like this flushed out in
Yeah.
a kind of a report form of the needs assessment going forward to help support that goal. That
Yeah,
And Tim, also the programs that are in existence that the county has or whatever has, for instance, I know there's some funding that we do to help people to make some adjustments in their house, so, you know, so that they can get around and stay in their home and get services there. So all of those
So it-
dynamics we should have in a report or something.
a needs and a gaps analysis really of what needs might we need to assist to support this goal.
Yeah, I think on that, Tim, way I interpret it is amenities, activities, services, transportation. We have a lot of these in place. Maybe it's just streamlining them and meeting with the community or outreach to see, like Tom, you mentioned, you know, where are we gonna be at in the 1, 5, and 10 year with the population? And then maybe we can modify what we have to accommodate the safely aging, you know, in place in their communities of choice. So just streamline it on the needs that are out there.
So, and I'm just thinking, listening, would it be good for Carla to come do a presentation, say in May, of what she's found or kind of this information, and then develop next steps from there? Is that, so May presentation, develop next steps? Okay. Available. Okay. That's starting to sound a little bit more like a task force than an individual responsibility. Maybe a few people looking at that through priorities council. Does that make sense? Okay. Great. Excellent. Thank you. Spotlight current child care facilities and locations in Lewis County and what they offer, and add 2 more base locations. We covered that. That was one of the recommendations. Develop a wellness plan with county employees by May 31st, 2025, and launch plan by July 4th. Example could be as simple as step counters with rewards. So a specific goal to employee wellness. What do you guys think? Okay.
I think that'll help and with the RFP for insurance. If that's implemented on our behalf, that may help with the cost of that as well in the overall concept.
HR being in charge of that, Caitlin? Yes, part of the wellness team. Okay. Yes. So, when would you like a report back on that? You do that one as March?
Yeah.
March, okay. I think they probably need to figure out what would be the most effective activities. And then implement after March. Yep.
Don't we have a wellness plan now that we're trying to follow, or do we just continue that? Talked at one time about like annual physical, annual blood test.
I think a similarity to that, Larry, is my, my health insurance from my employer. I have to have a yearly screening once a year, including my wife. So in order to stay in the plan, if not, then we drop to out of the platinum plan down to the silver plan. So it's behooves us to look after our health and in turn be part of the better insurance plan. But in relationship, if you get blood work, screenings, labs, it may find a underlying condition, which in turn can help you down the road and reduce claims as well.
I'm a little reluctant to turn this over to Jerry because I know this is a topic that he thinks dearly of, but it's the best way to help our health insurance plan is certainly promote wellness with our employees. And we've had a team that's worked on it. They've done a lot of good work, but there's not a concrete measurable. And I think that's what this is asking for. So we can certainly develop that with the wellness team. That is actually a critical finding. I think that's the building on and both short-term and another recommended goal, identify all youth programs in each town and village and how they are supported. Develop a plan to run all youth support and initiatives through the County Youth Bureau. I'm just putting it out there. It's a big initiative, and I don't believe Jenny has the resources to actually pull that off this year. we still have some unresolved issues on this front with the program. So
Could it be as simple, the mapping, somebody from the youth bureau going to town board meetings and asking those questions of what, you know, what do they have, who's supporting them? And I mean, if they're already supported and they're running fine, then, you know, we wouldn't have to do anything. I think that'd be a great, yeah, I think that'd be a great starting point.
So would you guys like a presentation from the Youth Bureau on available programs in Lewis County? And then you can kind of look from there where to go? That seems like a start?
I would think anything municipal funded. Does everyone else feel?
I think you're right. And that goes back to my concern that we had when this all started, that it's equitable across the county, because it's very tough to do to make it equitable. And if you don't, then I think it's unfair.
June 1 for a presentation? School-based? Yep, I would think CCE program. Mhm. So let's go to housing. Let's tackle the easy stuff. And there's two here. There's housing development, and we have two different mindsets. So think the planning department, policy development, land bank, landlord assistance, uh, accessory dwelling units, housing redevelopment programs, adaptive reuse of vacant buildings for housing, infill development, low quality housing facilities, improvements, and market rate housing development. Now, let me give you Jenny's list because it's all about care. The housing continuum approach of supported housing, assisted living, nursing homes, and hospice house. So we know we have a housing issue in Lewis County in two areas. One, the top one I would call the physical structures of places for people. And the bottom one is the support for the people in them. Or the people not in them that need to be in them.
Yeah, I like the bottom one because it's taken like end of life where people can still function a little bit with the assisted living.
Right.
And you know, that just gradually, I don't know how to say it gently, but that gradually drops down into the hospice situation.
Right.
So you're really kind of getting ahead of it.
It's also sort of a tangent with the other bullet that you have there, the aging population, how you support them to stay in the house. With a different tangent phase and that. I would think.
So there's a big list of issues there. How would you best like to tackle those? And what would be the things you'd like to get done first?
I guess I would ask over the last 4 years, is there anything identifying what housings has been created, like new housing for people, whether it's apartments, apartment buildings? I think it'd be a big win in 2025 to have Glenfield School, actually apartments.
Yeah, that's coming up. I think we have
Okay.
that in finance, but. A couple things that I can tell you that we're working on, land bank, for example, Ryan, now that he is in Jefferson County, has reached out to me to set up a meeting with St. Lawrence, Jefferson, Lewis about a regional land bank. So we're kind of pushing on that. Cassie brought the ADU grant proposal to the board last month. We have had a landlord task force or a housing task force looking at landlord assistance. One of the things we're seeing is potentially after COVID, there are places out there that people are keeping off the market, and that has created part of the housing shortage. Is there anything we can do to assist landlords so that they're more willing to open them up? So there's a number of different areas that we can attack this. We're just looking for kind of the legislative priorities and what you'd like us to report back to you on.
I would think a starting point would be to identify structures that might be, primarily reuse, like vacant buildings or, houses that could be converted. I'm thinking that codes would probably be the one to be able to identify, those structures that might fit the categories. And then, come up with a plan of how to convert them or a grant program to assist landlords or owners into turning it into a reuse.
I would agree with that. I think the adaptive reuse is the way to go. I mean, utilize the resources that we already have. If there's already buildings there, it's obviously most of the time better just to reuse the building. And, to speak on what Larry talked about, even if it's a abandoned house or something, maybe getting creative and tearing down, but then find developers that just want to build an apartment. building. So things like that.
I don't think that codes would be in a position to take title to this, but they would be in a position to develop a list of the properties that might fit whatever. Say a grant comes along and we would have a list of different properties that might be applicable to that grant. But from, developing a list, I would think it would be planning more than anyone to, actually try to move something forward. You don't have anything to do.
I think with that, Larry, it ties back to that blatant property. Working with codes, you may have 20 blatant properties that may be becoming an eyesore, or before they become condemned or abandoned, there may be one building out of those 20 that could meet this category. And then from there, it streamlines and can be reused and get grant funding for it to be repurposed to fit this category.
Yeah. Jeff, go ahead. And then we'll kind of try to sort.
I guess I'm reiterating that it seems like it's a combination between grants available and property that's available. But I'm not sure how much control we have over the property. We don't want to, if people own the property, they can do what they want to with the property, being a free country. We can't force them, but maybe we could suggest to some of them that, this option is available, but it's kind of a fine line. We can't.
Yeah. But that's actually going on with Grace from Cassie's department now, that she has identified some grants. Some properties have been identified that we've looked at from the tax foreclosures and also from what Codes has looked at. And they've been reaching out to those homeowners to say, listen, this is the status of your house. There's some grant funding available. We'll help you get it. to fix up the house so you don't lose it down the line. So I think that's what we're talking about, trying to develop even more maybe.
Anybody talk to Brookside? I mean, they own more land. They have a really nice facility. They've done it all themselves. And,
Mhm.
I mean, why are they expanding? Do they need more infrastructure or something?
Okay.
That we can help with.
Start a conversation with Brookside. Sewer and water. Yeah, let's circle in on that and see if, maybe some of the infrastructure stuff we're doing can support additional housing units there. Mhm. We have a great deal of talent. I mean, we've had a housing task force that's met 4 or 5 times with lots of great ideas of how we try to keep moving this thing forward. And then I think Jenny's right. You need both sides. You need the physical, the structures for people, but you also need the supports. Thoughts? Would you like us to kind of flush that out more and bring back a more specific, or is it something you don't want? So I'm going to suggest maybe a presentation from Jenny in May, June, July. What do you think? Well, I think we can get together and maybe talk about what you think are some priorities or some things that we can do in the near term to try to move this forward. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And maybe with that task force, we can identify 3 or 4 very small kind of next steps that we can bring forward. I Mhm. Yeah.
I would add in there, Barry's idea, at least a conversation with Brookside.
Yep.
To, they've managed this type of housing for a long time.
Right.
So they may spur up some good thoughts.
Supporting the continuum of crisis services and support available to Lewis County residents, specifically the mobile crisis and threat assessment management team. And Andrea, this kind of goes to that conversation that the sheriff had brought up at the last meeting. Anna has kind of made this a priority this year, understanding that there's a lot of people in crisis, and we do have grant money available to develop a TAMS team, which is the Threat Assessment Management Team. And it is a requirement from New York State that every county now have that. Any thoughts?
What would the timing be, Tim?
I think there's been preliminary conversations on the TAMS team. There's been a number of meetings. Andy, you want to briefly where we're at? Well, the first one will be in works by July, and the second one will be a plan by May, and we're going to put Anna in charge of those. Okay. That's all I have for that committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Draft resolutions, Cassandra.
The first one is reappointing John Lehman of Krogan as a member of the Lewis County General Hospital Board of Managers for a 5-year term.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Authorizing acceptance of bid and purchase of a 2025 Can-Am Defender Max Limited Crew Cab Side-by-Side UTV at a cost of $32,310.99 to be used by the Sheriff's Department for UTV/ATV trails through Lewis County.
Any discussion? Are they selling the other one? Okay. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. I think that's it. No motions, no executive session. Motion to adjourn. Josh, second. Barry? Community Services is adjourned.
Finance and Rules Committee to order. Everybody's received the minutes, and make a motion that we approve them. Do I get a second? Jeff? All in favor, aye? Minutes are approved. We have a presentation by Tim on our goals.
Let's go over the 2024 goals. Continue broadband expansion program in progress. We've made quite a bit of progress, but we wanted to tighten that up a little bit more and continue it for 2025. Complete the New York State DEC Smart Growth Grant Application Project, which is in works right now. And in 2025, we'd like to support the BEAD funding projects, which are the state-run projects. It looks like the state's going to kind of start to take over more of this responsibility for the broadband build out. So that's where we're at for that one. Explore options for bed tax auditing and collection. And I put new developments because we were kind of on our own until this year. We got to review and amend our local law on bed tax. And there, we obviously have to maintain a registry, which Eric already has set up, and we'll kind of give you updates as that law rolls out in New York State.
You know, Tim, just to add to that, I think that in addition to amending our local law, we'll have to look at some of our code laws because some of these things require them to be in compliance with what they have in their houses or units or whatever. So we may have to have codes go out and do inspections. So
I think they already, word left, but we chatted about it and they
Yeah.
already do. If they're on our registry, they have to go out on an annual basis and check. So,
yeah. So, but just so you know that we'll try to coordinate at that and make sure we get codes involved in that as well.
establish a community engagement specialist position and develop a community engagement plan, including engagement with towns and villages. We have hired that person. I think we want to create a communication strategy for the committee chairs and staff. That was one of the goals that was recommended. Create 3 educational opportunities, budget, economic development, tax levy workshops of that type for the towns and villages. And I thought it was probably appropriate here with the community engagement person. And then also we should be providing you with a community engagement plan, a written plan of how we plan to proceed. Does that seem reasonable for 2025? Work with economic development partners to clean up vacant properties, including the reuse of Lions Falls School and Glenfield School. That is in progress. Some really concrete goals: have Glenfield School back on the tax roll by December 31st, 2025.
To back up one.
Yep.
Tim, on the, plan for the community engagement.
Yes,
What would our timeline like be on that?
for a plan. I would say we should be able to have something done by March or April. Okay. March. And we'll have Kaylee do that. Thank you. Work with the economic development partners to clean up vacant properties, including the reuse of Lions Falls School and Glenfield School. Have the Glenfield School back on the tax rolls by December 31st, 2025. We should know by the end of this month about the grants for that project. And if that doesn't happen, Cassie and I have already talked about, we need to have a plan B for that facility. So.
And I think that would go into, kind of what we were talking about earlier with, partnering with our economic development, agency to, create a list of vacated properties or those properties and looking for the economic possibilities.
Right.
Of those properties.
like the one in West Leiden, that school.
Yep.
Josh mentioned the one in Turin, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this? We want to have moving that one forward. Okay. Identify a developer for the Lions Falls Schools redevelopment by June 30th. Enhance land use and taxation policies with a focus on transmission and solar development. That is in process. We're reaching out to all the towns and assisting them with their land use zoning related to the solar. We did think it would be important to add energy storage because now that's a topic of discussion. Yeah, we're calling it energy storage, but it can take on a bunch of different, as we're finding out, it's not just batteries, it can be compressed air, storage. Yeah. Continue solar overlay district implementation. And as part of that land use, I would recommend land use and taxation policies is making sure each of the communities have host community language in their zoning. Else there?
What about the National Grid transmission expansions? Would that be a 2025 goal or just a project that I guess we're on?
I think it's just a project we've been monitoring, and I think, and I don't want to speak for the Board of Legislators, but after their last meeting, most of the concerns, I think, had been met. Do we need a follow-up with them?
They owe us a follow-up on whether that project falls into giving community support funds.
Okay.
And, like I
Community-
said, if they're
host
on the edge,
community
I'd like to
money. Yep.
tip them over
Okay.
to be able to access that.
And they also they haven't gave us the full plan. I think it's done.
Right. So we want to keep that one on the radar for 2025. National Grid transmission line. Monitor and continue discussion, I guess. Develop employee appreciation initiatives. This is one that I put in progress. I think many things have happened on this front, but we didn't clearly define, a success for this. But I know Caitlin has done quite a bit in this area. Is there anything more that you want to see us do, or do you feel like we're accomplishing this?
Oh, with that specifically?
Yeah, with that one,
Sorry.
nope. We're good with this one? Okay. Implement county assessor and real property data collection in progress. Any discussion on this one? So I would say that every assessor in each town is up in September. So we will report back with the success rate of that initiative in September. And Candy will be making a presentation to you next month on this because there's a number of moving pieces that we want to kind of vet. And then we'll have some authorization to allow her to go ahead and enter into IMAs with the towns at next month's meeting.
I think that'd be great, Tim. And then there's a price per parcel per se for each township to, which pretty much be the same price, overall price that they're currently paying for their assessor in a roundabout way.
And we do need to be a little fluid with that, and I think that's part of the conversation. Assessors are very hard to come by right now, so. Regular updates for audit, budget, and health insurance. And this was, we were talking about earlier, Herb, I think about reporting back to the board. I think you asked about that. So what would that look like for you guys? Would you like monthly, bi-monthly? What type of reporting would satisfy for audit, budget, health insurance? What would you like to see?
I would like to see monthly.
Monthly reports. Okay.
And something that goes along with this is, since we're talking about budget, so, a goal would be create a dashboard on our website. So taxpayers can see these
Okay.
things as well, like a pie chart, something easy to read for people.
Yep.
So
And then monthly reports to the committee. If it can go right in the package and that's shared with the public. Anything
Yeah, I
else?
think,
Yep.
well, the audit and budget, to Herb's point, even a simple thing like the fund balance, when there's like we had that flood, that really drove our fund balance down.
Mhm.
And that's a good educational piece for people to realize, hey, why did it drop off? Well, this is why.
Yep. Else on that? Yeah, put me on that one. I was thinking Eric, but he's still here to say no. Right, right. We could overwhelm you with information. And what we've got to try to do, to Herb's point, is kind of create dashboards or some high level information. For example, fund balance is easy. Here's your month to month fund balance. We could do that. I would think the budget reporting, like year to date versus budget, but it would have to be just per department. You wouldn't want every single line item in there. It just gets overwhelming and confusing. But I think if we can come up with some like high level stuff that you can look at to see where every department is performing with that, is that what? Yep. Right. Yeah. Because if we handed you everything, you'd get 500 pages every month and it wouldn't be very helpful.
And I think that would maybe alleviate some of the stuff in the department reports that we get every month. If the budget information was consolidated in one place, that would be easier because everybody reports it differently. When you look on our reports and it's hard to figure out, okay, is this good, bad? It's almost like there's pluses and minuses, or you're not quite sure how they're accounting for them.
How they're performing.
Yeah, so if it was all in one spot, it wouldn't be on those department reports. It would come from a separate one in one
Okay.
spot. I think that would be very helpful.
Improve our budget information for the public and look at additional financial information we can make available for the public on a monthly or quarterly basis. I think, Herb, that's right. Exactly what you're talking about. Some dashboards and or reporting to you guys. Create quarterly updates, scorecard for high level budgets per department and health insurance and hospital current versus budget. Just real high level stuff like we talked about. Put Tim and Eric on that and we will have something for you in 2 months. How's that? Well, you've got to get through audit, correct? 2 months. Okay. So March. Work with towns and villages to replace and expand water sewer infrastructure. And that has been in progress. I think we've been very successful at obtaining grants to help the villages replace their water infrastructure. Do we want to continue that in 2025, continue supporting water infrastructure development and funding needs for the communities? Yep. Okay. I think that's a Cassie And I think that's a quarterly report as to where we stand.
And on that, Tim, I think this is great. Just overall concept as you say for the project that I've been involved with, we're expanding and branching out outside the normal realm where the water currently is. We're increasing the size, we're expanding it, so there's more development potentially forthcoming. More and more people that have large parcels can subdivide, and in turn you have 1, 3, 5 to 10 additional homes put on the tax roll, which in turn adds to the overall value and
Right.
reduces the tax rate for the people.
And it says water infrastructure. I was toying, this was a recommendation from the legislators. I was toying with the idea of water and sewer infrastructure because if we're going to get economic development, we have to have sewer available. So I think sewer needs to be added to that conversation, and where are lots that business could develop that has both water and sewer available. Okay. Anything else on this one? Okay. Consolidate financial functions in Munis to achieve labor efficiencies. We talked about that earlier. I think that's already been up there in the different areas, is it not? No, we can, what do you guys think about that?
I've heard complaints about Munis, that it's hard to use, so if we can, you
You're
know.
100% right,
just
Jeff.
A couple slides back, we were talking about how to make things better for employees.
Yep.
Maybe, it's not incentives and giving them stuff, it's making their jobs and lives easier at work. And
Yeah.
just if we can help them out or have somebody that specializes in it, so they don't have to know all the details, I think that would be great. Because I hear a lot of complaints about Munis.
I will throw a kind of a sub bullet in there, and we're still exploring this, but Eric and I and Brian have been looking at some other options too. Oracle makes a similar product. One of the problems with Munis is a very good accounting system, and it's very good at keeping track of our budget. It's not very good at reporting back. So if the dashboards that you guys talked about, it's very difficult to pull data out of that and then slice it in different ways. So when the gentleman came at budget time and said, geez, it would be really nice if we had these graphs and this information about our budget, I don't disagree. It's a lot of work to pull it back out of Munis in any meaningful way. So we're looking at different options to do that. And I think that'll help the departments as well. So consolidating the people getting into it and then figuring out a better way to report the information back out of it.
And maybe if there's a better option besides Munis.
And a different option altogether. That's kind of the direction we're headed in. Yeah. Okay. So we don't necessarily need to do that. It's more operations, but yep. What's that?
I'm sorry, can we get a
report back on
Yeah,
it?
even though it's outside,
Yep.
just so we as legislators know
Okay.
kind of an update on that.
About 6 months, we'll give you an update on that. Economic development goals. Identify all vacant properties by towns and villages in the county and rate economic possibilities for each by June 1st, 2025. And I think this, Josh, was what you were talking about. The Fast New York program, which is a program that has grant money available for business development parks, water, sewer, and power 40-acre site. And then develop one new business in the hamlet of Glenfield by July 1st, 2025. These were all recommendations, the 3 sub bullets, and I just grouped them under economic development. What do you guys think of those? Good?
I think they're fine. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Why was Glenfield picked out?
I
I mean, I
think,
think Okay, I just wanted to.
Yep.
I kind of, that was in the back of my mind, but I was like, we've got just Glenfield up
Right.
there. We should be helping everybody, but.
Yeah, that was the legislative recommendation, but I think because of Complete Street.
I think to piggyback off that, the town of Martinsburg, they've done their water and sewer
Mhm.
upgrades. They're still, those projects are underway. Powis is a GC on that. You got the complete streets, you got the Glenfield School. There's been a lot put into a 1 mile area, so. And hasn't been really touched in many, many years, so I guess with that amount of money put into that pot, if you can get one new business in there, that'd be beneficial.
Huge. Okay. Right. As far as the one new business, I mean, we can try to support that as a goal, but there's no way we can guarantee that's going to happen. But that, and all three of these, I would say, are with our economic development partner, Naturally Lewis. So, and we've been, and this is exactly the conversation we've been having is you guys set the priorities, we can give them to them, and then they can try to figure out where that fits in their plan. So I think that's our goal. And I told them as soon as this was done, we would send them this. So any other things in that? Consolidate financial functions in Munis. We talked about that. Develop a strategy for employee health insurance fund balance as an economic source for curbing constant health insurance premiums increases by May 1st, 2025. This was a recommendation. Obviously, we need to do something to stabilize the health insurance fund balance. Any thoughts? The reason that that date, May 1st, is picked out because we will have the actuarial reports on where the fund balance stands and what we may need to do to stabilize it. So hopefully by May 1st, we can have a strategy outlined for you as to how to rebuild that fund balance and stabilize that fund.
Hey, Tim, or maybe a question for Eric. When do we anticipate possibly getting that, return back from the state? Probably next year?
Okay, leave that in as a goal. Okay, who's responsible? Eric? Okay. Get back to an annual tax foreclosure cycle and process. Yes? I think that's a Joan project.
Yeah,
Is-
and we are back on track to have a tax foreclosure this year, probably in August or September.
Does that money have to go back to the property owner? I mean, that was the issue that we had before. that
Any
came up.
excess at the auction will have to be held. We have to hold the funds, turn them over to the court. The court then is supposed to have some kind of a hearing or something to determine who will be entitled to any of the overpayment. And if there is some, and there aren't other kinds of liens, IRS or something like that, then it'll go back to the homeowner. We will not keep any of the overage. We can charge up to a certain percent for the cost of us running the auctions.
So along that line, Joan, would all liens be funded through the foreclosure process or just federal IRS?
Yeah, just the federal. Yeah, everybody else gets wiped out.
Yeah.
This board has the ability to say whether or not they want a particular condemned structure taken down, or we can just leave it and sell it at auction as is.
Wouldn't that be a benefit though to, if we foreclose on it, to tear it down because that gets added onto the tax bill, correct? But then if it auctions, we get back the taxes, recover our taxes and then the balance goes to,
Presuming that at auction that you can get the amount that you were asking for in the back taxes.
I think to Jeff's point, though, it moves our position as far as subjugation on that debt, right? Because it would make us first in order. But yeah, something to think about.
I mean, it was like if it's a bad vacant property that's in terrible shape, I think it would, well, we can discuss it later.
Yeah.
It'd almost be better to invest in the property and clean it up.
Establishment of a micro transit through the Lewis County Public Transportation System. This was a recommendation as well.
That means.
Often called the last mile transport because the bus will get you just so far, and then how do you fill the gaps in from there? And it's not a fixed route service, it's a point-to-point service. Any thoughts? We want to pursue it? Okay. And I think that goes to Cassie. And what timeline? Okay, for 2025. Okay. Okay. Is there any other goals that we missed?
I have one thought, and I'm not sure if it's a goal or not. Like to figure out the puzzle of how to reward our landowners and our clubs, ATV clubs, snowmobile clubs, and the landowners that provide trails for our system. I know we can't do it directly, but I had this thought that maybe we could put on a banquet for them and we could fund a 501c3, just give them a block of funding, which would essentially cover the cost of, say, a banquet. I don't know if any of that's legal. I don't know if anyone has any interest in doing something like that. If we could pull it off that way.
So I can certainly look into that and come up with some suggestions, and then I guess maybe, Larry, we would need to have a sense of what you think the cost is so that we could come to the board for that. Or, through the committee, through finance and rules.
Yeah, I know the Long Pond Snow Sled Club, they have a banquet like you're talking about, Larry, for the landowners. It's like a free dinner,
That's what I'm talking.
appreciation dinner. is
Yeah,
what it is.
appreciation dinner, but the minute, if we, the county, were to put on an appreciation dinner, then it could be viewed as compensation and they lose their coverage under the general obligations law. So that they would, at that point, they're being compensated. So, they would need to buy insurance. Where now they're covered under the general obligations law that they're indemnified because they're not receiving any compensation. But I thought maybe if we ran it through a separate, like a 501c3, which is legal for us to donate to, and then they put it on, maybe we can get around that, that indemnification problem.
So a goal would be to explore landowner recognition program for ATVs, Joan, and snowmobiles. We're going to give that to Joan.
I think there's like cross-country ski clubs that have trails through private property and stuff.
So on that, Larry, for, this will be the third year, we haven't had any meetings on it, but for the last 2 years, we have the county association, the snowmobile association for all 9 clubs, but we kind of branched off from that, and Jackie Mahoney was involved, Katie Malinowski. We took Vermont's playbook and did a trail easement study and put that together. That's how Vermont's trail systems are. They're all through easements. And we have I call it a playbook. We have everything together where it doesn't give the landowner a monetary value. Like you're not giving them a $100 check. But in turn, when they file their taxes, they get a little bit of a discount. It's a trail easement, but we haven't really finalized it. We were looking at Vermont's system, trying to see how it would work, if it could work in New York State.
Guess I don't really care how we do it, what the path is, but I think they're a critical part of our infrastructure, rail infrastructure. And, I just think that we need to somehow show our appreciation through, I don't know if you can sell easements in Lewis County. They tried that 20 years ago and it wouldn't work primarily because of one individual, but maybe you can get there. I'm open to whatever.
Could we give them tax incentive, property tax incentive?
I have,
Joan in 6 months. Okay.
I think 2 other things.
Yep.
We've gone through all this work and we've done it in the years past. What I would like to see, if it's possible, is we've set up all these goals. Maybe, it doesn't need to be every month, maybe every other month, 4 times a year. if we could get those goals given back to us in a packet.
Yep.
That says these, just reminders, here's our goals and what's the progress on them? You know, it doesn't have to be huge, just a little, just to keep them in our mind. That was one thought that I had. The other one I had was a lot of these things involve going back to the towns and working with the towns. I would really like something that when I go to a town board meeting, I've got those in front of me.
These goals.
Not just the goals, but what we want, something to talk, but what the county needs help, what we want to work together on, like, I will give you an example. Last night I was at the town board meeting and it came up for the, grant for, yes. They brought it up. I had heard about it, was in the back of my mind way, way back, and it just by chance, they found the email, but if we could get that, the legislators could get that when they go to the town board meeting, they've got that and they can remind the towns, you got an email, you know, it'd be helpful if you signed it. We don't get that. And I think we need that. I go to the town board meetings and, the Tug Hill Commission has a whole list that they go through. And I sit there, well, I'm here to answer any questions. I would like that list to go through. There's an awful lot that we've put up on that pieces of paper that could go back to the towns that are moving forward, revolving and change every month, that we could just have that.
So if we took this list and created an outline and then once a month included it in your packet with whatever steps have we taken that month to push that goal forward, would that be helpful or would that be too much?
I think that's too much. I want
Okay.
stuff that involves the towns. We talked a lot of stuff that involved the towns that I think we could have on there to remind the town.
So we'll pull out the ones that are town specific and do that.
And those, I think we should have updates and what towns are on board or have done this and which ones are lagging behind. You know, there was some things about, you know, battery storage and solar and all that. Which ones have taken that and done that and which ones haven't, that prodded along saying here.
Okay.
I would find that helpful, but that's up for discussion for everybody else.
We'll put it up there, town reports or reports with any activity related to the towns. Else? All right, thank you.
On to resolutions.
First one is requesting New York State home rule legislation to continue sales tax increase of 1% for an additional 2-year period.
This isn't moving it to 9%, it's staying at 8%.
No, it's the same, the one we've always had, yep. Anything else? All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay? Carried.
Appointing Peg Newspliger of Lyons Falls as a member of the Lewis County Ethics Board for a 3-year term.
Question? Favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Authorizing bid award and agreement between Lewis County and Logical Operations for information technology training services at a cost not to exceed $27,010, payable from the New York State Department of Homeland Security Cybersecurity Grant.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Authorizing Lewis County to apply for 2025 New York State Empire State Development County Infrastructure Grant Program funds up to $500,000 with the 50% required match provided by Lewis County for road and complete street infrastructure improvement projects in several Lewis County villages.
Any questions or comments?
What villages?
So this program is brand new from ESD and it's specific to just counties. So you can apply for $500,000 if it isn't directly relative to a 10-unit housing facility or at least a 10-unit housing facility, or $1 million if it is an infrastructure that's directly relative to a 10-unit or more housing facility. So there was several projects that we ran by ESD. One of them was the hospice home. Another was the Lions Falls School to see if it could go towards that because it's something that we were already working on. And they said, no, it's not towards the actual home. It's towards the infrastructure to assist in that. It really needs to be shovel-ready projects. So that took our list down quite a bit. But as Tim and I had both alluded to during this process, we've been working over the last couple of years to coordinate efforts on various projects that maybe John Reed is already working on when it comes to the highway investments that are currently budgeted, where we can coordinate efforts when it comes to engineering to save money efficiently and effectively. And there's a couple projects that we were already working alongside the municipalities on for their water. So Constableville, that's something that we've already actively submitted NBRC grants for, WIA grants for, that we paid for the PER for. So Constableville is a great option. We kept it open because it's very fluid right now on what projects are ready to go for this funding and what are not. But right now it looks like the Constableville roadway project that is already a priority for our highway department. And it would include complete streets and it would go alongside their water project that they have planned. Or there's a variety of other projects down the road that could be funded, but it's our hope to use this funding towards projects that are already in the budget. So it's really saving the county money versus being an additional grant where you have to do the 50% match. That's another portion of the grant that we're kind of bottlenecked into what project we put it, because if we apply for $500,000 towards a project, you have to match that with another 500,000. So it just made sense to move it forward for projects that are already in the queue, if that makes sense. But right now it's Constableville because they have an active water project, and or Port Lyden, and then we investigated Turin, and then there's a couple other communities. And this is just round one. As funds are not used, it'll be recycled and there'll be subsequent rounds. So we'll be able to address other areas too.
Anything else? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Setting a public hearing with reference to inclusion of agriculturally viable land into the certified agricultural district number 6 for Tuesday, March 4th at 5:00 p.m.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye? Carried.
Standard workday reporting for election commissioners Lindsay Burris and Ann Nortz, as well as Deputy Election Commissioner Devin Kogut.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Carried. We don't have any motions or an executive session. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Jeff, second by Herb. All in favor? We are adjourned.